take a look at what we need to cut for our Globetrot travel sling. We need 2 strap tabs, 2 exterior contrast and 2 medium interfacing, and I fused that. We need 2 strap tab stabilizers. This is from Deckerville Light, and those are them there. And we need upper front body, 1 exterior contrast and 1 heavy interfacing. Just take note of how to place your pattern piece when cutting. So face up on the right side of the fabric, glue side of the interfacing. That's just so you end up with them the right way so they can be fused together. For the lower front body, I've used a feature fabric. You could of course do it all out of the one fabric. 1 exterior feature and 1 heavy interfacing, and I've installed my label there, and I've just added some interfacing over the back of that to protect the bag from wear. Now if you're using a heavier fabrics or vinyl and so forth, you may either use a medium interfacing or no interfacing. And if you do not have any heavy interfacing and you're using quilting cotton, you could add 2 layers of the medium, or simply just have a softer bag. For the back body, 1 exterior contrast and 1 heavy interfacing. For the flap, 2 exterior contrast and 2 heavy interfacing, and you need to cut 1 with the pattern piece reverse, so cut 1 like that, flip it over, cut 1 like that, and the same with your interfacing so that you are able to fuse them. For the slip pocket, this is waterproof canvas, so it does not need interfacing. Just cut 2 lining pieces. If you are using a quilting cotton for your pockets, you might want to interface them with a medium interfacing. Front zipper pocket, same thing. We are cutting 2 waterproof canvas there. You need to make sure that you choose the left-handed if you're making the one that goes on the right shoulder to sit on your left hip. So pay attention to whether you're making the left-handed version or the right-handed version, because that will apply for those pieces as indicated. And for your back zipper pocket, cut 2 lining, and these are your window placement marks. So the hardware and notions we need, I'm going to use webbing for my strap. You can use fabric or if you prefer, but I like the webbing because it's quick and easy and available in so many nice colours and patterns now. It's a 1-inch webbing or 2.5 centimetres, and I'm using 150 centimetre or 60 inches of length. You may wish to vary this depending on your size as required, longer or shorter. A 16 centimetre 6¼ inch zipper, it's a number 5, and a pull. This is for your back pocket. And we need a 20 centimetre 8-inch zip for the front pocket with a pull, and it's also a number 5. For your hardware, we need 2 1-inch hooks, 1 inch being the interior measurement of the hook there, the part where the strap goes in. 2 D-rings, also 1 inch or 2.5 centimetres. 1 slider, 2.5 centimetres, 1 inch. We need a cam snap for the flap if you are making the flap version. The flap is optional. You can leave that off if you wish. For this one, I have left the flap off. And we just have a quick access pocket there, which is great for your phone. But if you want something more secure, you can add the flap, in which case you need the cam snap. And a couple of rivets. You can add more rivets if you want more bling, but I've just used 2 rivets on mine. I've put one here where I've added it to a hook here, and I've put one here where I've added the slider. Now also I'll just mention I have folded that to add there so you don't see any raw edge, and for this one I have just finished the end by melting it with my lighter, and you don't see it, it's hidden in there. But if that bothers you, or you have a webbing that frays really easy, you may wish to bend it over and add it like that, but I just like the lower profile of just having one layer. So that's why I do it. And I do also add a little bit of fray stopper on there as well as scorching it to make sure it doesn't fray. Yes, that was the cam snap, and that's what we need. In addition to that, I use some double-sided tape. I have a selection of different sizes here which I use depending on what I'm trying to achieve, but I definitely recommend the little narrow one for your zipper. Okay, so let's get started. Retrieving your strap tabs stabilizers and a couple of D-rings. First thing we're going to do is we're going to fuse our stabilizer pieces onto the wrong side of our strap tabs. Just going to center and fuse them in the middle like so. So I'm just going to pop over to the ironing board and do that. I'm just going to eyeball it. You can measure it if you wish. So now I have fused those. I'm just going to grab a little bit of double-sided tape and I'm going to run it across the top and the bottom edges. You can skip this if you just want to press it, but I like how it holds it nice and firmly into place. But if you're using vinyl or leather, you should probably do the double-sided tape because you can't press it. And we're just removing that and folding it in towards the center. Same on this side, so that they meet there. There, now it's up to you whether you want to press that as well or just use the double-sided tape. And then we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch each long edge 3mm 1/8 of an inch from the edge. So now we're going to top stitch our strap tab pieces, and I'm going to use a top stitch length of 3.2 or thereabouts, and I'm going to stitch about 3mm 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Like that. I'm going to repeat for the second strap. Okay, so now that I have my strap tabs ready, I'm just going to grab a couple of clips. I'm going to thread this through wrong sides together like this, and put a clip on the end to hold. Now I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch close to there, and I'm going to top stitch 6mm 1/4 of an inch from each of the raw ends. If you don't want to do that, you could just add a rivet there if you prefer, but I'm going to do some top stitching. So now I'm going to top stitch close to the D-ring. I'm starting in the middle because I find it holds the layers more accurately together. It's top stitch length of 3.2. And then I'm going to top stitch 6mm 1/4 of an inch from the edge. Like that. I'm going to repeat for the second one. So now we'll just set those aside and retrieve our strap. And we also need to retrieve our hooks and our slider. Now grabbing your webbing, and if you have a right side or wrong side, you are placing this wrong side up with the slider, the wrong side facing you. Put it through there and through there and out the other side, and pull it through about 4 centimeters. Now this is where you can either stitch a rectangular box to hold, add a rivet, Or alternatively, if you don't like this raw edge and you have something that frays really badly and you don't feel it, that singeing it or fray stopping it's going to hold it, then I suggest turning it under like so and then stitching your rectangular box or adding a rivet. But I like my strap to be a bit thinner there, and I'm happy with the way that's not going to fray there. So I'm just going to pull that through and I'm going to add a rivet. So I'll just add a clip on there for now. Now that's about 4 centimeters, 1.5 inch or so. It doesn't really matter. I'm just eyeballing it, pulling it through how far I think, and then putting a clip on there. So now I'm just going to punch a hole where I'm going to put my rivet. I'm going to eyeball the spot. And I always have a selection of rivet sizes on hand so that I make sure I have the right size. And you could also add some fray stopper on there if you wish. Now the right length of rivet is when your knobbly bit in the end just pokes out. If there's too much more than that, it's too long, and if it's not poking out, then it's too short. So just compress the layers around and check on that. And now grabbing a hook, I'm going to find the other end of the strap and place it through so it is facing outwards of the wrong side, or outwards from this side where you've got your rivet attached. And then grab the other end, make sure you have it the right way, put it through like so. So that's what you want it to look like that. And the other end of the strap goes through the hook, making sure again that it's facing the right way. And I'm going to fold this end over because I want it to look a bit neater, because you see this end. So I'm pulling it further through and folding it over so there's about an inch or so tucked in there. I'm going to add a clip to hold, and now I'm going to pop a rivet in there. You can also stitch a rectangular box if you prefer. And now we have our strap, like so. So now we're going to work on our front zipper pocket. We need to also retrieve our 20 centimeter 8-inch zip, and I'm just going to run some stitches along each end just to keep the pull from coming off. Now we need to mark our window onto one of these pieces, and the way I like to do that is actually cut this window open. You can do this whichever way you feel works best for you. And I'm just going to do this, clip that on there, and clip the other end on there. Grab my pen and just through that gap there, just going to find the end and mark it. Same at this end. Sometimes I completely cut that out as well. And I take that off and I see that that mark didn't work. So I'm just going to put that back on there. And make sure I have a mark. Now I'm going to grab a warm make a mark. I want those to be even, so I'm just going to make that point. I doesn't really matter if it's not exactly in the center. Like that. Now I'm just going to retrieve the bottom piece. That is the lower front body. And I'm going to place this over here on the right side. This is for the left-handed version. If you were making the right-handed version, everything would be reversed and the pocket would be over on that side and that curve would be on this side. But this is the left-handed version. And I'm just centering it so that there's even amount top and bottom. You can get the ruler out if you wish. Stick some clips on there to hold. And now I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch those two lines, beginning and ending at my dot, which is not very even there, so I'm just going to make a line here so I know where to stop and start. Because it does look neater if you get those end points the same. We'll go to the sewing machine. So now, using a stitch length of approximately 2.4, I'm going to start right on the end there, and I'm stitching all the way to the other end, back tacking at each end, other side of the window. So now I've done that, I'm going to cut this middle section. I would normally use a rotary cutter to cut it, but I don't have one right here, so I'm going to use my stitch ripper. When I find it, here it is. Just going to make a little hole. Just make a hole and then grab a pair of scissors. Now snipping over to the corner, trying to make sure I don't snip my thread. Now if you do snip your thread, go back and reinforce it at the sewing machine. Like that. Now what we need to do is we're going to finger press, and I like to use the back of my scissors to really give that a good crease. If you're using quilting cotton, you can press with an iron. And now what we're going to do is we're going to grab a pen and just mark, and this is just eyeballing at approximately 6 millimeters, 1/4 of an inch back from the end on both sides and also on the other side of the pocket. And now I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and top stitch 3 millimeters, 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the fold between those two lines. Flip it over and do the same on this side. Okay, so now I'm just going to fold that over at the crease, put my needle down into the fabric, and I'm stitching about 3 millimeters, 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to use a stitch length of 3.2. Going to flip it over and do the same on this side, just making sure I don't catch that fabric in my stitching, and keeping that taut and pulled in place. Like that. I don't know if you can see it, but it is now stitched both places. Now that we've done that, I also like to add a little fray stopper if I'm using quilting cottons at each corner, just to help make sure that that doesn't unravel. And now we need to poke this through to the other side. And that stitching will help you fold that over and get it in the right spot. And I'm going to use the back of my scissors again just to crease that. I don't want any of the lining rolling towards the front. Like so. Now flipping it back over to the other side again. I'm just going to grab some double-sided tape and run it along each window edge. Like that. Now we need to make sure that we are getting our opening end of our zipper up this top end. So I want to make sure that that's on the right end. So that will be this way. So I want that at the top. And what we're going to do is we're going to position that. Remember the curves down the bottom and the zipper opening end is at the top. So I'm just going to peel this backing off. Now what we're going to do is just line up the ends of this zipper pocket fabric with the ends of our zipper and position that over. Double check. And now we need to just get this zipper evenly positioned in here. Like so, and press. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the sewing machine and top stitch all the way around our zipper. Okay, so I've put my zipper foot on and I've changed to a thread to match my fabric. I'm going to stitch at a length of 3.2, 3 millimeters, 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the opening. And you can either pull your threads back to the back of your work and knock them off, or you can just back tack a couple of stitches to lock your threads like I'm going to. Cross. Now I'm just going to go backwards and forwards a couple of times here, like that, just to lock that zipper down. It's a bit high stress point. Same at this end. And back to where I started from. Okay, so now that we have stitched all the way around our zipper, we're going to flop it over to the other side. And now I'm going to cover the bottom end of my zipper tape just to make it look nicer on the inside. And I'm just folding that over the tape like so. And I'm just going to add some clips to hold it there. Now I'm going to go back over to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch down there. I'm just going to try and catch that little bit of zipper pocket window opening and stitch all the way from top to bottom. Oh, it actually goes round that way. Okay, so now I'm just going to stitch 1/4 of an inch 6 millimeter seam, stitch length of about 2.4. Don't stress too much if you don't catch too much of this pocket in there. Like that. Okay, so now that I have stitched that zipper window there, we're just going to fold this down. I'm just going to grab my scissors, close that up, and I'm just going to give that a good crease. And I should have used the white thread there so that it hid that stitching better. You wouldn't see it. Having our second pocket piece, and I'll lay that right sides down on there, and we're just going to clip these edges together. Like that. What we are going to do is go over to the sewing machine. We're going to flip that over so the body is right side up, and we're going to stitch down there, catching that pocket fabric window in our stitching. Okay, so now with that pocket clipped on there, we'll flip that over to the right side up of our body, and we're going to stitch the pocket right close to that, facing that pocket fabric there, using a stitch length of 2.4. Okay, so now we've stitched that seam, we can get rid of these clips. We're just going to trim that pocket fabric back to about 1 centimetre or so. Now, what we're going to do is flip it over, because we've got this body fabric right side up, and we just want that fabric pocket of the pocket to lay nice and flat. And we're just going to clip those top and bottom edges together like that, and I'm just going to trim this excess fabric off so the edges are even, like that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to want this fabric to fold under to the wrong side on each of this side edge here. Couldn't think of the word. I'm going to use a bit of double-sided tape to hold it in place. With that fabric laying flat, hopefully those clips have held it in place. Just going to line up those edges so that they match. I'm using the back of my scissors to crease. Some scissors do a better job at that, and this one's pretty good at that. Like that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the sewing machine, fold this fabric back, put some reinforcing stitches at the end of those triangles there to help secure that zipper, and then we're going to stitch the side seam, doing the same on this side. You might even catch that triangle in with your seam, but I always do a few extra because I like that to be nice and secure. And we're leaving this bottom part open for turning. So I've just stuck my regular foot back on, so I'm going to stitch. If that's too bulky there, you might want to do this with a zipper foot, but I've just got my regular foot on here. And I'm just going to use a stitch length of 2.4, trying not to catch the pocket fabric, the body fabric. Now I'm just going to stitch my seam at 1 centimetre 3/8 of an inch. Just going to flip it around to the other side. And 1 centimetre 3/8 of an inch seam. Like that. And I've left the bottom of the pocket open for turning. Now that I have stitched my pocket, I'm just going to trim these corners back. I just want to make sure it's not going to interfere with my seam. And because I've trimmed that zipper a bit there, I'm just going to grab my lighter and singe that off. Like that. Now we can set that aside for now. Okay, so now that we have that pocket finished, we need to mark the centre of the top of it. The easy way to get accuracy with that is just to fold the pattern in half and use that. Sometimes folding the fabric isn't very accurate when you've got all these extra layers attached to it. And for the upper front body, we need to mark this straight edge. And again, I'm just going to fold the pattern in half and I'm going to use that to find my centre point, like that. And same with these pocket pieces. I'm going to use my pattern. Like that. So now we're going to grab one of the slip pocket pieces, place it right sides together with our lower body at the marks and clip to hold. And we're going to do the same with this. Right sides together, find the marks and add some clips. Like that. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch using a 1/4 inch or 6mm seam. Okay, so now I'm just going to stitch this seam using a 6mm 1/4 inch seam and a stitch length of 2.4. Like that. Now same with the other piece, 6mm 1/4 inch seam. Like that. Okay, so now we've done that, what we need to do is grab, well, I use my scissors. We need to press this fabric up away from the body. And same with this one's got to be down away from the body top. Like that. Now what we need to do is place these right sides together. Just going to clip this fabric to hold it in place. Like that. And we're just going to get these body panels lined up. Like that. Grabbing the ruler, we're going to measure and mark 1 centimetre in from the side of that pocket fabric, so it's there. And we're going to be stitching at a stitch seam length width of 1 centimetre, so you can just mark this in if you wish or just eyeball it. So this is the part we're going to stitch. So we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch these two sections here. We're not stitching the middle, we're only stitching those two sides. Okay, so now we're just going to stitch those side pieces like I marked. 2.4 is my stitch length. And I'm back tacking at the beginning and to the end of the seam. Moving across to the other end, making sure everything stays pulled up out of the way. Like that, left this section open. Now that we have stitched those two, we're just going to remove all these clips. And now what we need to do, flip it back over to the wrong side, and we're going to press this open. And this is why we stitch at a 1/4 inch for this, because then you have a little bit of the exterior rolling to the inside so that when you flip it over you can't see that pocket fabric and it makes it more hidden. A lot of people wonder, why do we have to stitch at 1/4 of an inch? But that's the reason. So you should be pressing it so that you see some of that exterior fabric on the inside. Now, if whatever materials that you're using do not want to stay pressed open, you can always add a little bit of double-sided tape onto the seam to help hold it open. Like that. Now what we're going to do is I'm just going to put a clip in here to hold that out of the way. Make sure it stays in the direction it's supposed to. I'm going to flip it back over to this side, and now we're going to top stitch on the lower body side, not this side yet, just on the lower body side, 3mm, 1/8 of an inch from the opening all the way across though. Okay, so now I'm stitching with a stitch length of 3.2 and a scant 3mm, 1/8 of an inch from the seam line. Like that. And now I should have used my zipper foot because it's easier to get a nice straight even stitch seam. Okay, so now that we have top stitched that seam, we need to flip it back over, and we're just going to smooth this seam pocket down. So the seam, that pocket is like that. Just going to add some clips. That seam remains pressed open, and now we're going to go flip it over, and we're going to top stitch the top side of the seam. Okay, so now I'm with all the pocket fabric downwards, going to top stitch a scant 3mm, 1/8 of an inch. Like that. And it's caught that fabric in there, so it's made the top pocket nice and secure. Okay, so now that I have stitched that, my pockets, and I'm just going to trim those seams so that they're even. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fold our pocket. And that should be staying pressed under. We're going to fold our body panels so that they're together like so. I'm just going to clip that. So we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch our pocket closed, beginning and ending pretty close to this fabric here, but try not to stitch into it, and all the way around and end there, 1cm, 3/8 of an inch seam. Okay, so now I'm going to, that's what it looks like on the back, going to be stitching 3mm, 1/8 of an inch seam, starting pretty close to that fabric seam there, but not right on it. And my stitch length 2.4. Like so. Okay, so now that we've done that, we need to open this back up, flip that pocket down into where it's supposed to be, and what we're going to do is we're just going to grab a pen, and right at the opening I'm just going to mark a line between the two rows of top stitching, and I'm going to go and top stitch each side. Just do a couple of stitches backwards and forwards just to make that more secure. You can also add a rivet, just be careful not to puncture your stitching. If you add a rivet, you could add it just below the stitching, just to make that side of the pocket a little bit more secure. Okay, so I'm just going to do a few little stitches here between my top stitching just to secure that end of the pocket. And I accidentally chopped my thread. Oops, I went one stitch too far. I'll have to take my finger off the back button. Like that. So now that we have done that, what we need to do is retrieve our flap. We need to place them right sides together, like that. I'm just going to put some clips to hold, and we want to make sure that we have the bottom edge. Okay, so now that I've clipped that together and we have the bottom edge, because that curve is smaller than that, so I want to make sure we've got it orientated like that and not like that. We're going to mark a 4" or 10cm space down here at the bottom. Move away from the corner a bit so that you don't end up having a hard time poking out your corner like I did. Like this, and we're just going to measure 1 centimetre in from that side, like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to start by stitching there and stitching all the way around the flap and then back out to the side. So we're stitching those lines that we drew, and a 1 centimetre 3/8 inch seam, and we're leaving that gap for turning. Okay, so now we're going to stitch our flap, and I'm going to stitch using a stitch length of 2.4, and I'm going to stitch to the end of that 1 centimetre line that I made and then pivot. Just going to back tack to lock my stitches in place. Stitch length is 2.4 in case I forgot to mention it. If you find it hard to stitch around the curves, you could mark the seam line in so that you can follow it. Take your time, it's not a race. And stitch out to the outer edge. Like so. So now that I have stitched my seam, I'm going to grab a pinking shear, and you can trim the seams and notch them if you prefer, but I find pinking shears work really well. So I'm just going to trim around like this. So now all I'm going to do is turn it through the opening. I'm going to use the back blunt end of my scissors just to run that out. Don't poke too hard, poke a hole, ask me how I know. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn it under, down the bottom where we left the opening. I'm going to give everything a good press in a minute, but first I'm just going to turn that under, and I just use some double-sided tape to do this. You can just do it with your iron if you prefer. Now you can head over to the iron and give everything a good press, and I actually like to put some double-sided tape in between these layers to hold them nicely aligned as well, because I just find it holds better than pressing. And obviously if you're using something that can't be pressed, this is a better option. There, now I'm going to go and give that a good press with my iron. So now that I have pressed my flap, I'm just going to retrieve a ruler and I'm going to position this flap so it's between those two marks that we've got there from where we stitched between our two seam lines there. And I'm going to place this 3/4 of an inch down from the top raw edge of the body, entered between those two marks, and I'm just going to add some clips to hold. And now I'm going to grab a pen. So I'm going to measure 1/2 inch up from the top stitching on the upper body side, like that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take this off. We're going to go over to the sewing machine and top stitch from one mark to the other on the bottom side. So I'll leave that clip there to remind me that's the top side. And go over to the sewing machine and do that. Okay, so now I'm going to top stitch between those marks. I'm actually going to use my zipper foot. It just makes it easier to get a nice neat edge, nice neat width. That's a 1/8 of an inch or 3/4 of an inch. A 1/8 or 3mm zipper foot. So I'm just going to start at my mark. I'm going to use a top stitch length of 3.2. Back tack to hold. Pivot. Take your time. Ignore my dog barking there in the background. It distracted me and I made a mess. Like that. Okay, so now we have stitched around our flap. We need to find the point where we're going to install our cam snap. So we're going to be 2 centimeters up from the bottom. So I'm just going to guess where halfway mark is here. I'll just put a line across there. That's 3/4 of an inch, and then I'm going to find the center by measuring this way, which is 7 centimeters, 14, and put a mark. So that's where I'm going to install my snap. So retrieving the female button piece that goes in there, I'm just going to punch a hole at my mark. So I've got some fray stopper on there, and now I need to install this piece. Now we need to make sure we're putting the button the right way, so I'm just going to double check. So that's the flat button side that goes there like that, and there we have it. That's ready there. Now I'm just going to do that in a few minutes. Right now we just need to reposition this between those marks and 2 centimeters, 3/4 of an inch down from the top raw edge. I'm going to grab some clips, and what we're going to do is go back over to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch from those marks up around the top edge of our flap to fasten it to our body panel. Okay, so now we're going to top stitch this in place. Make sure your pockets are laying down out of the road. Just going to clip them there. We don't want to catch that stitching, so we're just going to pop this in where we left off before. Pivot. Back round to meet up with our previous stitching, like so. Now have our pocket attached. Our flap attached. We now have our flap attached. So now we need to mark the position of our bottom or other half male part of the snap. We need to, if you know what you're going to put in it, such as a fat phone like I have, you can put that into place so that you can get a more accurate fit, and then find exactly where the midpoint will be and make a mark. And that's where we're going to add our snap. Make sure your pocket is flipped up now. You want that pocket flipped up out of the way so that when we install this snap, we are not installing it into our phone pocket. And we need to flip this other pocket to the other side. It's caught under there, but I'm just going to put some clips in here to hold that. Same on this one. I don't want to install my snap into either of those two pocket pieces. So now I can do that, and I might even just put a clip to hold this up out of the way, like so. Now if you don't feel that that's enough strength, you could always add a little bit of Decaville behind there. So I'm just going to put a bit of Decaville light behind there, just to give that snap a bit of extra support. And there we have it. Give it a good press and we'll get on with the rest of our bag. Okay, so now that we have our flap attached and all that done, what we need to do is grab our strap tabs with our D-rings attached, and we're going to measure up 2 centimeters, 3/4 of an inch up from the raw edge, and just draw a line. And on our body assembly, we need to mark 2.5 centimeters or 1 inch in from the corner point at the top. If you're working on the right hand body, you're going to be over on that side. So on this one, we're going to do the opposite corner, and 2.5 centimeters or 1 inch up from the bottom will make another mark. And again, if we're making the right-handed version, those points would be reversed. Now, because my strap does look like it's got a nicer side on the right side, I'm going to mark the other side, the wrong side. I should have done this in the first place, like that. And now I'm going to place this right side down with that line aligning with the top edge of the body, and I'm just going to clip that to hold, so that's in from that 1 inch mark. Okay, so I'm just going to baste my strap tab in place using a 6mm 1/4 of an inch seam, a stitch length of 2.4. Keeping that line lined up with my body edge. Like that. Okay, so retrieving your back body and your back zipper pocket pieces, and I've cut out my markings there and added them onto my fabric like that. I'll just put one of those aside for the minute. And what we need to do now is we're going to grab this ruler and centering this left to right. We're going to place it 1.5 inches down from the top raw edge, or 3.8 centimeters. So I'm centering it so that these side edges are even. I'm just eyeballing it. You can measure it if you wish. And now you can either pin or clip that in place. Stick a pin in down here. Making sure that stays put. Going to add some clips at the side. And I don't think that's going anywhere. So now I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and stitch the top and bottom lines just like I did before in the front pocket. Okay, so now I'm going to stitch this in place, starting and ending at those points, and stitch length is 2.4. Like so. Okay, so now we need to make our hole in the middle again. Cut down the centre to that point there and out to my stitching without cutting my stitching. Like that. Now push the fabric upwards and crease or press. That, so now we're going to go over to the sewing machine after we make some marks. Make a mark either side, 1/4 of an inch back from the end of that stitching. Same on this side, just eyeballing it, doesn't have to be exact. Like that. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and top stitch 3 millimeters 1/8 of an inch from the edge there, and 3 millimeters 1/8 of an inch from the edge there. Okay, so now we're going to do some top stitching from those marks. Now my top stitch length of 3.2. Making sure that the pocket and everything's out of the way. Like so. Okay, so now that we've done that, again we need to push this through to the other side. Use my scissors just to get a nice crease. Retrieve your 16 centimeter 6 1/4 inch zipper and find which side's the opening side, and we're going to put that on the left if you want your pocket to open from left to right. So I'm going to peel this tape off now. Now we're just going to line up those edges with the ends of the zipper. When you're happy with your placement, we're going to go over to the sewing machine and top stitch all the way around that window. Okay, so now I put my zipper foot back on and I'm going to stitch, top stitch 3.2 stitch length, 3 millimeters 1/8 of an inch from the opening all the way around my window. Again, you can pull the threads to the back and knot off if you prefer, or just back tack to get that to hold. That's all I'm going to do. Depends how fussy you are. So now I've stitched around my pocket window. I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to clip that down onto the edge of that zipper tape. Like that. So now I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and stitch along that edge. It's about 6 millimeters, 1/4 of an inch from the fold. Okay, so now we're going to stitch again to try and catch some of that pocket fabric in our stitching, and our seam is going to be about 1/2 inch wide, but give or take, it doesn't have to be exact because we really want to just try and catch some of that pocket fabric. Like that. Okay, so now we'll flip that back over and we're going to crease that with the back of my scissors. Now retrieve your other pocket piece and we're going to clip that to the top edge of this pocket. Like that. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and from this side we're going to stitch. Putting my stitch length back to 2.4. Just going to stitch along here. So now we have done that, we're just going to trim that fabric back to about 1 centimeter seam allowance. Like that. Now smooth that out and we're just going to pull that down, clip it at the sides and cut off this excess pocket fabric. Like that. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine, put that zipper pull in the middle and catch those little triangles there with a few stitches, and then we're going to stitch all the way around our pocket and back up to the other side using a 1 centimeter 3/8 of an inch seam, and I'm also going to do a bit of stitching at that end of the V, just like a little bit of extra reinforcement there just to keep that nice and strengthened. Okay, so first I'm going to tackle these little V's. I've still got my zipper foot on, so I'll just do it with that. Like that. And I'm just going to put my regular foot back on. Stitch length is 2.4 and I'm going to stitch using a 1 centimeter 3/8 of an inch seam or thereabouts. Like that. And now that we've stitched our pocket closed, I'm just going to trim this corner back so it's out of that curve stitching. Grabbing your double-sided tape. Now this step is optional, you don't have to add the double-sided tape if you don't want to. I just find that it helps everything stop slipping and keeps it all nice together aligned. So now retrieving our front body assembly. Make sure your D-rings are in. We're going to place this right sides down, or right sides together, and align those edges. Just make sure your front zipper pocket is open because we need to get in there to turn it. So just make sure that zipper pocket is open. Right sides together, align those edges, and if you haven't used double-sided tape, just get some clips and start clipping. I'm just going to line it first with my double-sided tape, and then I shall add some clips as well just to make sure that that all stays where it's meant to stay. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and stitch all the way around the bag. Remember to make sure that this zipper pocket is open. Your front zipper pocket needs to be open, and we're going to stitch all the way around, and I stitch with all this bulky stuff at the top. Okay, so now I'm going to stitch all the way around using a 1 centimeter 3/8 of an inch seam, stitch length of 2.4, and I'm back tapping just at the beginning and end to secure that seam. I just like to reinforce this corner because I'm going to cut off that corner so that I don't want that stitching to come undone there at the corner, like that. Now what I'm going to do is do some extra reinforcing stitches at the tabs. Now I don't cut these ends of the strap tab off, I just leave them there. So now that I've done that, I'm going to trim this corner back. I'm not trimming that, but I am going to get my pinking shears. I'm just going to trim the seam, especially around the curves. Now I'm going to stitch the seam again, just within the seam allowance all the way around. Okay, so now that we have done that, we're going to turn this. So I'm just going to reach in here, make sure my pocket's open all the way. Push that like that. Alright, now we're going to have a little bit of a workout, and we're going to turn this pocket, or this bag, through this open pocket. Now you need to make sure that all the pockets are laying where they should be. And then through the open pocket, you need to get in there and push and pull that zipper pocket back out. I'll give everything a good press afterwards, but for now, just got to line these edges up. And clip them in place. Like that. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and stitch that pocket closed. Okay, so now I'm going to stitch this pocket closed pretty close to the edge, trying to keep those edges lined up. I'm going to use a stitch length of 3.2. Like that, and just inspect the bottom to see that you haven't ran off anywhere, and I have ran off a little bit here, so I'm just going to go back over that because I don't want a hole in the bottom of my pocket. Like that. Okay, so now we have our pocket stitched shut. Poke that back in there. Poke out those corners. Like so. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give everything a good press, but I'm also going to, where I can feel any lumps, I'm going to give them a whack with the hammer just to flatten it out. And then I'm going to give it all a good press. And there, I've given everything a press, and I've hammered any lumps and bumps, and I've tapped around the seam as well. I'm just going to retrieve my strap, and I'm going to attach that. Top and bottom, and there we have it. We have a front zipper pocket, a phone pocket or other pocket for whatever you'd like to put in there, and we have another back zipper pocket which is great for documents or anything else that you want hidden securely away. And this is the left-handed version, and this is the right-handed version, like that. And we're done. Woohoo!